Brian Cantor joining us from Shaking the Southland to break down at Clemson football with the Tigers concluding an 11-1 regular season en route to the ACC championship game this Saturday in Charlotte against Miami. Ryan, your thoughts initially about Miami? We talked about it a little bit before we started to record that these teams have played 4 common opponents in the ACC.
Florida State and Georgia Tech are the two that give us the most to talk about. Both teams destroyed Virginia Tech, really dominated that game. Both played Syracuse. Obviously, that's Clemson's loss. But Clemson played on the road without their quarterback. Miami had them at home. They struggled, but they pulled away with a close win. But against Florida State and Georgia Tech, Miami allowed 424 rushing yards, while Clemson allowed 224 rushing yards against those two teams, Florida State and Georgia Tech. And I think that's really the difference that we're going to see in this game is that Clemson's line, both D lines are actually very good. Miami's really improved there. And I think Mark Richt's Miami is so much better than Al Golden's Miami is. Their D line is just playing so much better. He had plenty of high-end talent, but no depth on the defensive line. And the talent he did have, he was not making the most of it. And Richt is making the most of it, and he's developed and recruited depth. So they have a good D line. They have a ton of sacks, but they don't stop the run like Clemson does. And I think conventional. They'll be forced to pass it, and I think Clemson will be able to still run the ball. Unfocused offense. I think they negate a lot of Miami's best attributes on defense, which is havoc, sacking the quarterback.
Yeah, Miami also has an excellent linebacking core. They were freshmen last year. Michael Pinckney, Shaq Quarterman's the best of the lot. He's kind of the leader of the linebacking core, calls the plays, gets everybody lined up. R.J. McIntosh in the middle for Miami, 11.5 tackles for loss for a D lineman that's being focused on at the tackle position, is a pretty stout defender in the middle that I think should vie for ACC Defensive Player of the Year stats honors in particular. So the Miami defense, yes, has shown some weakness here and there. The secondary has been the big improvement there. In regards to losing guys like Corn Elder last year, the defensive backs were supposed to be a suspect, but they've really stepped up behind Jaquan Johnson in particular at the safety spot, who had the big interception to break open and get them back in the game actually against Virginia after they were down on 2 separate occasions by 2 touchdowns. When you look at Clemson and Miami again, anything else that jumps out at you as the Tigers prepare for this one?
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting because these are 2 very different offenses. Miami is a little bit more pass heavy. Clemson's a little bit more run heavy. Miami is more explosive. The S&P Plus is a little funky this year. They have Ohio State as the #1 team. They have UCF above Clemson. They have some funny things going on, but their advanced metrics for how they measure different aspects of offenses and defenses are still really useful. Isolated points per play, or ISO PPP. And it measures how many points you score on the average play you run, adjusting for field position. And Miami's a lot higher in that ranking than Clemson, meaning the big play for a touchdown at any given moment. And that makes sense as you watch both of them. Malik Rozier averages 14 yards per completion. Kelly Bryant tends to throw shorter passes. He's averaging 11. That obviously, by guys like Hunter Renfrow breaking off the huge play like you were talking about, off of a 1-yard pass in the air. But Clemson, on the flip side, is more successful and efficient at getting the yards you need to stay on schedule. So when if it comes down to a battle in the trenches, and most games seem to come down to that, I think Clemson has proven they're very good at 4 yards and 5 yards on first down, getting it to the 3rd and short. They have a lot of options with the running quarterback, a quarterback who's very adept at the short passing game, down the field efficiently and methodically, and I think that's how they play. So it's gonna be really interesting, 2 different offensive styles in this one.
Yeah, Malik Rozier is going to have, no question, his best game and most consistent performance of the year against Clemson. He started off the year pretty much playing a lot of bad first halves against the likes of Duke and Georgia Tech, some of the teams like that. North Carolina was a team that the Tar Heels have been obviously awful most of the season, and they gave Miami all sorts of fits at Chapel Hill in a 24-19 win. Rozier was awful in the first half in particular in that game, but that's been kind of a trend for him. Then he's played better in the second halves, and then he seemed to have shaken that trend against ironically the best teams on the schedule in Virginia Tech and at Notre Dame, where he played pretty much a complete game, but he was supported by a running game and by the defense playing so well and getting out in front. And then against Virginia, again, off in the first half, and against Pitt, he just had an awful game at the point in which Mark Richt actually pulled him in the fourth quarter for one series to bring in Evan Sheriffs. But you're completely right about Miami. The quick strike has bailed them out many times with Jeff Thomas, Braxton Berrios, Christopher Herndon at tight end, maybe one of the best in the land at that position. But third down efficiency has been awful for the Hurricanes. This is something that has plagued them all year. I don't think you can look at any one particular game and say third down efficiency is a key, but over the course of 12 games now, or 11 games for Miami, that's obviously been a trend that means something in being one of the 5 to 10 worst third down efficiency offenses in college football. And that actually holds up regardless of how much yardage there is to go. They have been the worst in short, mid, and long-range third down situations. So that has to stop as well. So a lot of trends have to end for Miami, despite as good as they've played this year and pulling out games, playing better against the better teams. You can make all those analogies that they've played down to their competition and up to their competition. We'll truly see if that's the case against Clemson, by far the best team that they've played this year.
Yeah, I think one other thing worth mentioning here is how the hurricane impacted their schedule. We talked about it a little bit before we started recording, but they had the hurricane hit and they canceled their Arkansas State game. They postponed the Florida State game. Only 11 games of the regular season total, but 10 of those are consecutive. The ACC championship will be the 11th straight game they've played. And they looked tired against Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh runners were falling forward. They were pushing. The line was getting a push. And Miami didn't look like – they looked like they were outworked. And I don't know for sure if that was fatigue after playing all these games, or it was a letdown after the two huge wins with Notre Dame, though they did have Virginia before they had Pittsburgh. But they looked banged up and tired, and they weren't really able to handle Pittsburgh at the point of attack. And I think that's a big point here. And we'll see if they're refreshed. They have an extra day because they played on Friday. But I'm not so sure they will be. Amon Richards left that game against Pittsburgh with an injury. Chris Herndon left the game. He's a great tight end with an injury. We'll see if they're able to go and if they're 100%. But I wonder how much those 10 straight and now an 11 straight game is going to impact the game.
Yeah, Amon Richards, one of the best wide receivers in the ACC a year ago as a freshman All-American, just hasn't got it going this year. Has struggled with a hamstring since day one, and even with the layoff with the Hurricane, wasn't able to come back initially once they started playing games again, and it's just except for a few glimpses of his brilliance from last year, has not been the same player. Clemson, according to Vegas, the early line is 7.5-point favorite. The ESPN Power Index has them winning 73 to 74% of the time in this matchup. I think that's pretty fair to say based on the evaluation of these two teams. The record means something, but you certainly have to dive a little bit deeper into the common opponent assessment, as Ryan has, and look at the overall body of work and the resume. Miami's just a little bit more inconsistent, or Clemson more consistent against the better competition thus far. Should be an interesting one. The winner undoubtedly gets into the college football playoff. The loser, with Miami losing last week against Pitt, certainly takes away their opportunity as a second-place team in the ACC of making the Final Four. Ryan Cantor from Shaking the Southland helping us break down Clemson, Miami for the ACC crown. Ryan, we appreciate the breakdown.
Thank you. Appreciate it.